Well, hello, hotties. Grab a cuppa, get yourself comfy, because we have got a sexy little story time today. And that story time is when I created my first product, my Pilates DVD. What I love to do is whenever I have an event that I'm doing in person, I always love to have like a physical copy of the DVD. Because let me tell you, there is nothing as authority and trust building as holding up something as vintage as a DVD, a workout DVD, and telling people that you have been in business this long. I can immediately see people just relax and they're like, okay, cool. She just didn't wake up one day and she started this last week. Let me tell you that the process to create this was nightmarish and it was long, but I think that it is an interesting story. And if there is something that I believe, it did cement my thought that if you are a service-based business provider, if you are trading your time for money, you need to do something where you are putting your intellectual property and your brain into a product that is going to work so that you don't have to. Because I knew at the time when I had my studio, I was teaching Pilates classes. I knew that there was only going to be so many Pilates classes and so many clients that I was going to have in Maitland. And I saw my brand going global. So let's talk about the story. Now, before we get into the thick of today's episode, I have something that I want you to register for. What are you doing on July 1st? Because I am hosting a workshop, a hot little workshop called Work Smart, Make Bank, How to Commercialize Your Expertise in Digital Products. So if you have been in business for a while, if you know that you need to create some assets and products that are scalable, that are going to sell, that are going to, you can make money while you sleep, that you don't have to actually do the damn thing, you are going to want to get your butt along to this workshop. So register for that. It's happening on July 1st. It's going to be hot and you are going to love it. But I want to go back in time. Okay, let's get in a little time machine and we're going to go all the way back to 2009. And this was when I started my Pilates studio on June 1st, 2009. And I opened the doors to my physical location on August 24th, 2009. If you want to hear the story of this, head all the way back to episode 16 of the Business Fondle podcast, because I talk about when I started my Pilates studio. But I worked out very quickly that I only had so many hours in the day that I could teach Pilates classes. And I guess lucky for me, I started charging absolutely no money. Like you could buy a 5-pack of mat classes for $50. And back then this was fantastic because people would usually walk in with their little $50 note, sometimes in an envelope. They would give it to me and I would feel like an absolute queen with $50. Someone had literally given me $50 cash. Felt epic. But I knew quickly that there was going to be a cap, one, with the amount of clients that I could have, two, the amount of classes that I could teach, because, I'm just one person. And three, I knew that I was really good and I loved Pilates and I wanted to tell the world. Now, back when I was 15, I remember seeing Mari Windsor's workout DVDs on TV, or maybe it was 16. And I remember seeing an infomercial. They always popped up. I loved infomercials. Like, you know what? If there's something I love, sell to me. And I remember seeing her DVDs, and I think the whole collection was like $200. I looked at mom and I was like, I need these. Like, my life will be complete if I have these DVDs. I had like a really interesting relationship with exercise, and that was I hated it. And my parents tried to get me involved in everything. Like I have done belly dancing, I've done netball, I have done all of the things. So I think that when I expressed interest in some form of exercise, my mom is like, done. Yes. Because I just hated moving. She bought me these DVDs and I was obsessed. And I think the reason she bought them for me as well is because, Love Jan, she loved a little bit of aerobics and she had a whole collection of workout DVDs. She loved Tammy Lee Webb, and I remember that I always took her workout DVD, her workout, not even DVD. These were tapes. These were literal tapes. And she had a tape and it was Tammy Lee Webb, abs, abs, abs. And I think that I kept taking it. So I think in her mind, she was like, let me buy her own DVDs so I can get my Tammy Lee Webb back. So I had my Mari Windsor workout DVDs. It came with a TheraBand, and needless to say that I was hooked. I did this every day and I was so excited. My whole life was Pilates. And I remember one time I was standing in the mirror and I was like looking down at the side of my hip, and the whole like structure of my hip had changed. Like I had definition. my shape had changed, and I was hooked. I loved it. I lived and breathed Pilates. And it's interesting that back then, did I think that I was going to be an instructor? No, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. If you were to ask me, it would have been something in like fashion or design, because I loved fashion. I wanted to be a supermodel, as like everyone does when they grow up. It wasn't until I started my DVD, and then I started my studio, or I knew that I was going to open a studio. And around that time, there was a woman that popped on the scene, and her name was Tracy Anderson. I loved how she branded herself. Everything was just clean and it was sleek. I remember the exact like outfit she was wearing in like her promotional shots. And I remember the hype. So this was back when, we had magazines, and I remember always standing in line at the supermarket. You would have like a little bit of a flick through a magazine, and Tracy Anderson felt like she was everywhere. Everyone was talking about it. It was so hard to get the DVD as well. I remember I went into Sanity in Maitland and they didn't have it, and then we had to order it, and I had to wait for such a long time. And then it turned up, and there was something in me. I think, knowing that we had Tammy Lee Webb, we had Mari Windsor, and we had Tracy Anderson, and I knew that I was going to have a DVD. It's so interesting when you tell this to people and they're like, a DVD, why not an app? Apps were not a thing back then. And it's interesting how quick technology it just changes. You think about it, like ChatGPT wasn't here. How many years ago? I don't even know when it started. Was it like 2022, 2023? And back in, again, this is 2009, there was no such thing as an app. Like, I don't even know if an iPhone existed then, or if it did, a lot of people, they didn't really have one. I didn't even think that I had a phone that could connect to the internet. Like, I think that we had to go in the computer room for that. I knew that I was going to have a DVD. And I didn't know how it was going to happen, but I knew in my heart that this was going to be my future. So as I had my studio, I started working with more clients. And it was interesting having people where when I started my studio, I set out that I wanted to work with dancers. That didn't really happen. I had a couple of dancers, but the clientele that I had were usually people that had corporate jobs and they worked in banking, because you get one bank teller that comes along and then all of a sudden the whole office wants to come along as well. So I had all of these people who worked in banking, and I noticed something, that so many of them were tight, they were not flexible. And the problem was that this was impacting them when they came along to class. So we would do their workouts, but they would feel really stiff, and they also didn't really have a lot of time. And this cemented my idea that I was going to create a stretching DVD. I saw this being in a series of DVDs. So I didn't think that I was going to have one. I wanted to have like a Mari Windsor kind of brand where I was going to have multiple different DVDs. And I thought, let's start out with stretching, because in my mind, I was like, there's already Pilates on the market. You can already go and buy a Pilates DVD. You can already go and buy something for abs, but there's not someone that actually teaches stretching and flexibility. And this was something where people always asked. I've always been really flexible. I've worked at it really hard. Like one summer, I think I taught myself to be like a contortionist. Like, I did contortion training that I found on like old forums, and I got really flexible, and it worked so well. And then over time, I just started to refine this method and starting to, I guess, test it out on the clients that I had. And I worked out that I could make someone flexible pretty quickly. It's interesting that it then became this novelty at work, where people were like, I want to do the splits. And I'm like, okay, cool. If you want to do the splits, let's work on doing the splits. And we would do things like splits challenges. I think in my head, this cemented that this was going to be a good idea. And it's interesting that I look back at my past self and how she would have an idea and she didn't really put too much thought into it. She very much followed her gut instinct and her intuition, like this was a good idea. And what I mean by that is I didn't go and do a whole SWOT analysis on this. I didn't spend like 5 days researching. In my head, I was like, well, there is a market for this because it's been validated by these people. And I've noticed that there's a gap in the market, so this just feels like a good idea. And I had also worked out really quickly that this wasn't going to be the one thing that I was going to create. This was going to be the start of it all. So I had kind of taken pressure off myself of feeling like that this had to be this huge thing. I knew that this was just going to be the start of my career. And to be legitimate within the industry, like all of my idols, I had to create a DVD. What I will say as well is when I look back, I don't know if these people were approached or if they funded it themselves or if they partnered with like a workout workout company, and then they were the face and they created their DVD, kind of like with books where it's like, you can be approached by a publishing company or you can self-publish. In my mind, I was like, if I want to do this, I'll go and do it. And I didn't really think of ever contacting a company being like, do you want to manufacture my product? In my head, I was like, I will do this and I will figure it out. This was before the days of like how readily available advice is online. And I had no idea what I was doing, but I just knew that I could make this work because I am me. And if I could create a studio, I could do anything. And this could be something really good for you to think about, where quite often, if we are doing something new, we are doing something for the first time, it's interesting that we will be like, well, I can't do this because I've never done this before. And what you need to do is flip how you say that and look for evidence in other areas. And it's like, well, of course I can do this because I have done this. And you look for supporting evidence of how the thing that you want to do is going to happen because of all of the things that you've done before. So for the fact that I lived in Maitland and I had no idea about manufacturing a DVD, I knew nothing about nothing, I didn't really see this as a block. Now, I will say my dad was in advertising and I had a really strange relationship with going to school. My mum was starting to become a herbalist, so I either would go on her little field trips foraging for herbs, or dad would be like, you're going to learn more on set, you're not going to school today. So I would regularly be on set and I would see how things happen. There was a lot of screaming. Always screaming, lots of yelling, lots of like multiple takes. And I think that normalized for me, but this was just going to be easy because one, I'm used to just being yelled at and dad screaming. So if I get yelled at, that's going to be fine. And I kind of knew the process and the people that I would need in a team just purely based on what I saw my dad do. I want to say that this was back before you had iPhones. Like when I was toying around with this idea, I created a YouTube channel and I'm pretty sure it's still up. Let me go and find it. So I started my YouTube channel in March 18th, 2011, and I'm pretty sure that I did this because in my mind, I was like, I need to showcase that I know what I'm doing. And currently I am marketing to Maitland, but I need to think global. I was like, let's go on YouTube because I think back then we had MySpace, we had Facebook. I think Instagram was very, very, very new. I don't even think I got Instagram until the end of the year, but YouTube was something that I was like, people go to YouTube for video content. And I remember at the time I went to Harvey Norman and I'm like, I need to use something that I can record videos with. Like, what do I use? And they had actual camcorders and they had this tiny little awful video camera that was like portable and the quality was terrible. And if you actually go back, my YouTube channel is still here. So if you go to Pilates Evolution now, you will see my awesome 12 videos. You can actually see my old bloopers and the cover shoot as well as the promotional video for the DVD. So I knew that I needed to have something that was going to be a funnel for the DVD. And again, this was back before I knew anything about marketing. I really didn't have any idea about anything. A lot of this was just me intuitively feeling into what feels like a good idea. What is that natural next step? So where this really started, and something that I think is such an underrated, I don't want to call it a strategy because I'm conscious of kind of using people because trust me when I say I hate when this is done to me, but where this project really got some legs was every single person that I used within the production of this was either someone within my network or it was someone that was introduced to me from my network. This is why I believe that we need to get off our phone and we need to get around people, because I think that sometimes the internet can become a vacuum and you don't also get a sense of what people are like. I was lucky that at the time that this was all happening, yes, I had my studio, but all of my connections for this actually came from modeling. So I did this bridal show. And I met this incredible makeup artist. My lipstick needed touching up. And I just walked up to this makeup artist and I was like, can you please touch my lipstick up? And she was a bit grumbly because there was all of this stuff that happened earlier in the day. And then she reluctantly did it. And then I feel that I had beat her into submission because I was like, this chick seems so cool. I love her. All of the makeup that she's done looks flawless. I didn't really like mine. She didn't do it. I all of a sudden was super jealous and I wouldn't stop yapping. It also doesn't help that at that same shoot, I was with my friend Jess. My gosh, we're getting off track here, but I promise it's a fun story. And, one thing that they didn't do back in the day was feed the models, and we were starving. And they had catered this fashion show. And what we had done is we'd gone for a walk, we'd bought a bottle of champagne. We had then gone back to this fashion show where we were like waiting and everyone was getting ready. We were drinking the champagne and then we were like, oh my God, we were so hungry. And like these two ravenous possums, we find like the catering kitchen and we were stuffing our face with pavlova. And I was a bit, one, on a sugar high, two, I was a bit tipsy. So when all of this happened, I was kind of having like a bit of a drunk girl moment, being like, I want to be friends with you, be friends with me. And I don't know what happened after that, but there must have been something that she identified. No, I actually think that she's a pretty solid chick, and we became friends. And that was my friend Tanya. Tanya was actually the makeup artist of my DVD. And I remember that back then when you meet people, you put everyone on Facebook. So I would meet someone and then I would connect with them on Facebook. So I've been always the OG networker, adding people into my network. And lucky for me, I have been someone that probably used Facebook a little like Twitter. So where people would put updates on what they were doing on Twitter, I would do this on Facebook, which would annoy the shit out of everyone. But anytime I had a problem or I was thinking about something, I would just update my status. And I found this post like before even recording this, because I remember that at the time, Tanya had introduced me to the company that would actually shoot the DVD. And I'm pretty sure she introduced me to, maybe it was someone else, the company that would actually manufacture the DVD. Because in a way, I kind of had an idea of who I wanted, but I didn't really know what else I needed. And this had all started by me first locking in hair and makeup. Isn't that wild? So I didn't do anything else, but I was like, okay, cool. I like this person and they're going to do my hair and my makeup for the DVD. Can you do this? She said yes. And then she had mentioned 2 production companies. So I had gone and I had contacted those production companies and I had locked one of them in. And this is where sometimes I feel that you can add more noise by continually asking people. And you know that I am big on this. I'm like, you have to just make a decision. It's not going to make it more clear if you ask 500 different people. For me, I was like, who do I feel like has a good sense of this? Let me ask them. And I know some of you may be like, why don't you ask your dad and his connections? I think one of the problems was he's very old school. And I think also when you are old school, you're going to have a particular way of doing something, but you're also probably going to charge a lot of money. And if there is something I didn't have, it was not a lot of money. Because you think about it, I was running my studio. We had my commercial rent. I also didn't tell you this, but at the same time, I was saving to get my titties done. Yeah, I wanted like big, gigantic Baywatch titties. And I was modeling to get cash. I was doing like bridal expos. I did shit like Disney on Ice to get money. So I was booked and I was busy. And because I was booked and busy, I was going to all of the castings. So anytime we were in Sydney, because it was a bit of a nightmare to get there, I would go to castings. I'm like, what castings are happening? Let me go and I'll see if there's work. One of the castings I went to was a casting for Rebel Sport. And I remember walking in thinking, I'm so perfect for this. And then there was probably like 60 women. I remember going with my mom. And normally when I've gone to castings before, it's like you get an appointment time. But I was just told by, I think it was my agent at the time, to just turn up. And I turned up and there was just this sea of like beautiful, fit women. And I remember texting mom being like, go for a coffee because I feel like I'm going to be here for a while. And I remember sitting down and I was just talking to this woman. And then she had a friend that came in and sat down and then we all started talking. And that was a woman called Kate Johnson. And I loved Kate. We became, again, instant friends, partly because she also lived up in the Maitland Way as well. Kate introduced me to my web designer, Lee, from back then it was Lethal Digital. Now it's just Lethal. And Lee did all of the graphics for the DVD. So he did the branding, he did the cover, he did my website, he did my pull-up banners, he did my promotional stuff. And I got that connection from Kate. Kate said she worked with him. He was a solid guy and I just trusted her. And I ended up booking Kate when we did the fitness expo. Kate also was my promotional model. So I paid my friend. It's interesting when I look back at the journey that I went on with my DVD, I can look back and think that every single person that I had used had come from someone that I know. And if I didn't know them, I asked people that I trust. And the people that I trusted, there was a really key element here. that these people had to have good taste, or they had to have some kind of like entrepreneurial mind where I knew that I was giving, like, that they were going to give me good advice that I could trust. So I trusted these two people. And what I want to say is I started this process really early. So the idea for the DVD and the stretch DVD came about in like mid 2010. And I want to say the first thing that I did is I told everyone that this was what I was going to do. So on Facebook, I was telling everyone, I'm going to have a Pilates DVD. This is what I want to do. When 2011 hit, I knew that I needed to kind of put this in motion. So I started to loop in everyone because I was also acutely aware that, you know, we got to pay for the titties. We've got to run the studio. And then I'm going to have to manufacture this DVD. And in my head, I was thinking, I don't know how much this is going to cost. I wish that I could find out like the receipts and how much this was, but I don't have access to those records. I'm pretty sure it was around about like $20,000 that I put in between the filming and the day, the manufacturing of the products, the branding and the website, and then my hair and makeup. And then I did a photo shoot as well for the cover and the promotional assets. So there was kind of a lot that went into it. I will say that it should have been a lot more money, but I was so lucky that I think that a lot of the people that I had used had given me a bit of a deal. They were just happy to come in and help. What I also did, because I knew that I didn't have a lot of money, I also had to have some assistance for things. So we had to have assistants for the shoot, an assistant for when I did my day shoot, and where I could, I would actually pay people in Pilates classes. So I'm like, hey, if you want to come to the studio, I can chuck you some private lessons. You can come in for mat classes. I'll comp you for like a whole term. And for me, that was a fair trade because I knew that I had spare mats and I knew that I had something that they also, like, this was quite enticing. Like back then there was no other Pilates studio in Maitland. There was me. I knew that I could teach one hell of a class. And this was a way where it didn't really cost me anything to do because I already had mats for free. So in 2011, I think like the whole process of where this started was me kind of telling people about it and continually telling everyone that I was going to create a DVD. And one thing that I noticed with people is it's really interesting that they were so pressed about the process and how I was going to do this and how I was going to get it stocked places. And in my head, I was like, well, this feels easy. I feel like the hardest part is thinking of an idea and making that perfect. Because if it's not a good idea and if it's not a routine that I feel proud of and it's not a product that I feel proud of, I'm not going to want to promote it anywhere. So I thought the hardest part was getting the sequence perfect because I was also aware, shit, this is not going to be like a YouTube video or a workout where if you teach a shit class, you can just make the next one better. This was going to be the thing. So I think one of the longest steps of the process was coming up with the sequences. I wanted to do more. In my head, I was like, oh, we could do like a chair stretch and I could do this and then I could do that. Then I found myself getting really overwhelmed because I was trying to do too many things. And I think this all came together when I was away on holidays in Port Macquarie with my mum. I remember this really clearly. I'd gone and I'd bought like 2 of these little bracelets from this shop in Port Macquarie and I had them on. I'm in my little nightie, we're in bed and we're watching a movie and I had my notebook and I'm pretty sure it was an orange pen. And I was just kind of jotting down the exercises that I wanted to teach in order. And I remember looking at it thinking, yeah, I think I've done it. I think this is it. And feeling just so proud and almost this sense that I could just exhale because it felt like it was the hardest thing to do was just come up with this sequence. So then what I did once I had this sequence is I was using all of my clients as guinea pigs and they were happy. They were happy to be a little guinea pig, but I was testing out how things worked and the order of things worked and did it make them more flexible. So this was tried and tested on a variety of different Maitland babes. So a whole, like a whole variety of clientele. And it got amazing results. And I worked out quickly that the 2 sequences were beginner and advanced, and beginner was aimed to get you to touch your toes with ease and advanced was doing the splits. And I wanted to do this quickly. But I have a fun story. I didn't realize how quickly I would work through the routines because I forgot that when I was teaching this, sometimes I would take a little bit more time explaining and asking questions and I would have clients. So if they were kind of stalling on something, I would get up and I would go and fix them. Or if they looked like they were lost, I would spend a little bit more time on it. And I worked out that in the studio, I think it took about like probably 20 to 25 minutes to do each routine. And I'm like, this is sweet. I'm going to have like an hour-long DVD. And guess what happened? When we actually shot it, which was, I think it was the start of December in 2011, I ran through those routines so fast that we did one in 12 minutes and one in 15 minutes. And I didn't think to tell anyone that we needed to kind of have them at a particular time. And I was stressing. So when I got the edited versions back, I think one was about 15 minutes and one was 12, and I felt sick. Like I actually felt sick because I thought that no one would want to do it because they were too short. And it's so interesting saying that now, where I know that people pay for speed. And if you could tell someone, hey, I will make you really fit, but it's going to take an hour a day versus 5 minutes, people will want the 5-minute option. Again, I didn't realize at the time, because I was a business newbie, I was still shitting in nappies, that people pay for speed. And that this was going to become one of the best selling features because I could then say, I'll make you flexible in under 15 minutes a day. That was one of the strongest features of getting people to buy the DVD. Because anytime someone said they were short on time, I was like, everyone has 15 minutes. You can get this done. There's no excuse. We got a bit off track there. Let's go back. That was around, I guess, the sequence in filming. Then we had to do a photo shoot. And it was funny actually, it wasn't funny, but with the photo shoot, my parents had a really beautiful home. I had finally picked where we were going to do the actual shoot, and that was at MBN Studios. And I think for the day, I don't know if I paid like $1,000 or $2,000 to hire the studio. And I wanted to have something that looked different. I didn't want to hire that studio again. Remember that we are in Newcastle, so there's not too many options of where we could go. And I didn't want to have to kind of like double up and hire the studio again for the whole day. So I had met this photographer who I had done like a whole lingerie shoot with on the beach. And I loved his aesthetic. It was very high fashion. And I decided to loop him in for this project. When we shot this, it ended up being on my mum's birthday. So it was the 19th of June, 2011. And my parents were going through a divorce. The house had hardly any furniture. We did have to move some stuff around. But I remember my dad turned up. My mum was there. I had like a whole production team. I had gone out the night before. I do not know why I thought that this was a good idea. So when we actually did the cover shoot and all of the promotional shoots, I'd had no sleep because I had been at the Delaney and then I'd hooked up with a really hot guy. And then I'm pretty sure I went to bed at 5, but I had to be up at 6 at Tanya's house. And I remember turning up at Tanya's house and she looked at me and all she did was just shake her head because I think that she knew. So that was fun. I will say, thank God that I was in my early 20s because even though she knew that I'd had a hectic night, my skin didn't show it and I still looked fantastic. And we had done the shoot that day. I think we took like a whole day's worth of images. Again, I will say I didn't really go in knowing what I wanted to do. I put so much trust in my team and the people that I worked with. And I knew that they understood the vision. They kind of knew what we were doing. And I knew that if we got enough shots that I would just make this work. What I did is I actually sent all of this to Lee. And I'm pretty sure that he had made the decision of what was going to be the cover shoot. And it's so interesting now looking at me now versus back then and how I am a bit of an A-grade perfectionist control freak. But back then I put so much trust in my team. And I think that there is something where when you hire experts, you have to trust them. But I also feel that as you do this more and more and more and more, you start to develop an eye of what you actually want and like what you know is going to look good. And I knew that I trusted my team, but I didn't really know how I wanted things to look because again, like newbie in business, still shitting in nappies, I didn't really know what was going to be good. But I got all of the pictures back and they were absolutely sensational. Like I was so happy. And I ended up using these images as well because when the DVD had come out, I didn't really have a lot of money to pay for advertising, which I will say, make sure that when you are creating a product that you actually have funds to market it. That was a mistake that I had made. But I worked out that I could write articles for magazines and I actually use these beautiful images in the articles that I wrote. So what we had done on the day as well, because I had so many images, I had told everyone that this was going to be the first DVD in a series, so let's get lots of different images. And I was like, well, let me get some shots using a big ball and then a magic circle and then a foam roller and a TheraBand. So I think in total we got over like 200 shots. Because again, I didn't really know what I was doing, but I knew that I wanted this to be the start of everything. And again, this was in June. I'm pretty sure I got the pictures back maybe July and August. And then production for the DVD was happening in December. And this was all around a launch date of exhibiting at the Fitness Expo, which I think was in maybe it was April or May 2012. And I remember going there a couple years prior with my boyfriend, who was a personal trainer. He was super big into bodybuilding. He loved fitness. And he had said to me that anyone who's anyone in fitness is at the Fitness Expo. Like, their product is here. Everyone congregates here. And in the back of my head, a little seed was planted that I needed to be at the Fitness Expo as well. So the deadline that I had put in place was the Fitness Expo. This was really helpful because I am someone that will continually push dates. I will push dates. And what I mean by that is I will be like, oh, we'll do this in the future. We'll wait a bit. I'll just do this in the future. Oh, we'll wait a bit. But I didn't want to wait another year. We had this deadline. Now, one of the problems that I had is the production company was a little bit slow in doing this. And I had got to a point where I was like, oh my gosh, we are not going to go to the Fitness Expo with a finished product. I did lie a little bit when I said we didn't have any money for marketing because the Fitness Expo did cost quite a few $1,000s to do. I was stressing thinking we're going to go to the Fitness Expo and I'm not going to have a finished product because I feel like that my deadline is a little bit too close. But that all worked out in the end. So the production company did their thing, and then I went into, I think it was like Tommy Rock maybe, and I did the voiceovers of the DVD, and let me tell you, that is stressful. That actually was probably the most stressful experience of the whole thing because it was getting it right and it was getting the timing right and feeling like that I had a lot to say. And as I said, remember, I felt like I rushed through the routines a bit. I felt like that I couldn't get out what I wanted to say. So what I would have done next time is actually record something, at least on my phone, of me talking it through, making sure that I had like a bit of a script and doing that nice and slow so that when I went into the studio, I could redo that script, but I didn't do that. So I was just kind of on set doing these little sequences myself. And then we're in the studio and I'm having to do this voiceover being like, shit, what was next? And I remember the guy at the time was getting a bit shitty, but like, oh, well, you're getting paid. And I did that. So that was all fine. And I'd worked with a company called Media Movers that was doing the actual, like the physical printing of the DVD. So that was all done within Australia. And I think I paid, maybe it was like $1.10 a unit. That was very reasonably priced. And I don't actually know where I found out about them, but I know that it was someone on Facebook that I put something up and I was like, where can I get these DVDs manufactured? Now, the reason that it was so cheap is because guess who ordered 5,000 copies? I did. In my head, I was like, well, DVDs are small, so how many can 5,000 really be? I'll just order 5,000 units because this is going to sell out. Like, I'm going to be a multimillionaire within a year, so I'm going to need stock. Like, we're going to sell out at the Fitness Expo. And this was one area where I probably should have been a bit more conservative and not bought as many. Because I remember at the time I was living with my mum at home and I told her that I was just going to get the DVDs delivered to the house. So I'd had a studio, and in hindsight, we should have just got them delivered to the studio because we had this room that we didn't use. And this truck pulled up in the driveway, and I remember the back of the truck opened, and there were all of these boxes. And Mum was like, "Oh, how many more deliveries do you have to do?" And the guy laughed, and he's like, "These are all for you." And I remember my mum shot me the most cutthroat glance I have ever seen. Like, if looks could kill, I'd be dead. I would have just died then and there. And there was so many boxes. Like, if there was 100 DVDs in a box, we had 50 of these big boxes. I was like, it's going to be fine because we're going to sell them. And Mum was just like, we had to help this guy unload 50 boxes of these DVDs. And I was stressed. Because I think all of a sudden I saw all of these units and then it clicked, oh my gosh, I have to sell them. It's so funny that I forgot about the marketing and I forgot about the sales. And I was like, oh, okay, oh shit. All right. Okay, sweet. And I think that's when I freaked out because everything all of a sudden felt really real. I felt like that I hadn't really done enough. And it's interesting that I feel when I look back, I did a really good, I did good, but I didn't know. I didn't know what I didn't know. Like, I didn't know that you were meant to have a wait list. I think I was told, but I didn't really do anything with it. Like, I was talking about it, but there was no real strategy behind it. It was very much me thinking, okay, well, let me do this. Okay, I don't really know what I'm doing. And I remember that when we launched the product, I did sell it at a higher price point, which There was some regrets because everything was sent registered post that people have to sign. And I would never do that again because it was so time consuming. And in hindsight, I'm like, if a DVD goes missing, we'll just send another one because it's so low cost. And in hindsight, I should have gone lower cost, high volume. Maybe, you know what, it's really funny. A few people were like, did you do digital downloads? And I was like, well, back then everyone had a DVD player. I think I maybe sold like 7 in the first day. And I think that was a very, I'm going to call it a sobering day because I straight away was like, I don't know if I can do this. I remember in the lead up to the DVD, I tried to find sponsors as well because I was like, it would be really good to align myself with people. And I told everyone that my goal was to sell 20,000 in the first year. And it was really interesting that I was kind of laughed at by people. And when I was asking for sponsors, it wasn't a lot of money. It was like $2,000 like for a sponsorship package. And we were going to, I think, put them on the DVD and put them on the banner. And it's so funny now that if someone came to me with that same thing, I'd be like, fuck yeah, it's a tax deduction. Like, you know, I think that we could get something good from this. Like, let's do it. And I think the most that I got was my wardrobe for free, which was from Abby and Joseph. So they just sent me a whole heap of clothes, but I didn't get any money. And I remember at the time, I felt like that everyone was suddenly right. And why the fuck did I think that I could sell 20,000 copies of my DVD because I'd only sold like 7 on my first day? I think this was hard. I think it was hard because it is hard when the vision that you have for the business doesn't align with reality. And that was what was happening. I had gone through this whole process. I felt like that, you think about it, it was almost a 2-year mark from me deciding that I wanted to do this to getting this physical product in my hands of 2 years of hard work. And remember, this was not just the only thing I was doing. I was also building my business up. And shortly after this, we'd actually moved location. So I got a much bigger studio. My rent had, I think, tripled. And I like was getting my boobs done. There was all this guy drama and like shit that you would deal with when you're like in your early 20s. And I was writing for magazines and I was modeling. There was so much happening. And I think that I had this moment where I was like, what the fuck was this for? I have done all of this for nothing. And it kind of felt like I had run a marathon and then I was told, oh no, you haven't run a marathon. That was a half marathon and you've still got the rest of the way to go. Which is why I tell my clients now that it's like, you want to make sure that when you are working on your product, whatever it is, that you loop people in. You don't want to kind of work in the creation cave and then release it to the world. And I don't think I did that because I was telling everyone about it, but I think that there was a disconnect with the audience that I had and like the idea of how many I wanted to sell. And it's interesting, when I look back, I was like, what would I have done differently? And, you know, Instagram was really, really new. There was YouTube. We had Facebook. And I think one of the blocks that I probably had was, you know, back then, if you lived in a regional town and you weren't in a city, it was harder to get connections. Now with the internet, it's so much easier and a lot more people are willing to work with other people. But I think that that was a bit of a block. I didn't really have like a profile. I wasn't on TV. I was really a no one. I was just this passionate Pilates instructor with now incredible boobs that wanted to spread their idea out with everyone. And what I eventually had done is I had bought a PR company in to kind of intro me to some magazines so I could write some articles. Did that really work? Kind of. But the most success that I had was I was sending people my DVDs. So I was doing influencer gifting, I think before this was even a thing. And I sent it to quite a few people and they would talk about it on Instagram or social media. I remember that I used a website back then called Source Bottle, and we had a Facebook group that I was in. I think it was the B School community, maybe. I remember that on Source Bottle, there was this really generic little call out. And it was something like, hey, we are looking for health and fitness products that you can do in your lounge room or something. I contacted them straight away and I was like, I've got a Pilates DVD. I'd love to be featured. And he's like, great, send a press release. And I remember sitting there thinking, I don't even know what the fuck a press release is. What do I do? Because remember, this was before, like, you had the internet, but no one was as freely giving as they are now. And I remember going into this Facebook group being like, oh my God, I've got this amazing opportunity. I need a press release, like ASAP. Someone told me how to write it and I just went and I wrote it, and I didn't even know if there was typos, but I've never worked that fast in my life because I knew that if this call out went in the morning, there is a chance that they would have needed this by lunchtime because of how fast the newspaper moves. I was going to Gwingana health retreat, and I think it was my last day or the day before my last day. I'd become friends with one of the ballerinas at the Australian Ballet, Brooke Lockett, and we'd met, I think, on Instagram. And I think Brooke had sent me this. I think she'd taken a picture and she'd sent me the Body and Soul Sunday feature. And then when I checked my inbox, I had 60 sales come through. And it was the most sales that I'd have ever got in such a short space of time. And I remember being at this health retreat and just being, even talking about it now, I feel like I cry, just being like so overcome with like emotion that everything was happening. And it's interesting. I actually don't even know what year this was, but I remember that I think that this may have been the next year. So maybe like 2013, or maybe it was 2014. I can't even remember. No, I think it was 2013. And I had just been working so hard and we'd never had any success like that ever. And it's interesting that, you know, when I look back, I could tell that this was so much fueled by passion and I really loved what I did. I loved the process. And I think this is one of the mistakes that I see that entrepreneurs make, is they very much are fueled by this can make me $1 and they don't really love what they do. And anytime that there is a road bump, they want to stop, because what they are doing is that they are fueled so much by the cash, but they don't really care. You know what I mean? Where for me, I was like, I knew this was going to change people's lives. I knew that it was an incredible product and I love Pilates. And even on the hardest days when it felt like no one was buying, I was still going to show up and I was still going to sell. So I think in total, I sold about 4,000 copies. As I said, I can't remember. We ended up switching to instant downloads, which you would think that they would do better because they were cheaper and people would get them instantly. But it's interesting that people still wanted the DVD. And I think it was around maybe like the end of 2012, 2013, where I was like, maybe we should do an app. And again, no one really knew what that was back then. Or if they did know what it was, no one really knew how to do it. And it's interesting that I often look back and I'm like, where would I be if I could have done my app? Like, where would I have been if I would have created a Pilates app and put that on the App Store? You know, I feel like it would have been one of the first apps and I just didn't really have the capital. And I think it's interesting that, I don't know, you know, when you're like intuitively, maybe you know that your life is not meant to be fitness, it's meant to be something bigger. And in a way, there have been times when I've regretted things. Like I have looked at really big fitness entrepreneurs that took off, that did something at the right time, or they had a connection, or they had someone within their network that could do this, or they just had more money, or they had capital. And it's been a lot of work for me to acknowledge and not beat up a past version of myself that did the best that she could at the time. You know, like I fucking manufactured a DVD and I did it while I was doing all of this other stuff, and I did it myself. Like yes, I had a team, but it's not like I had someone like telling me what to do. I didn't have a business partner. Like I was the business partner. There has been a lot of work that's gone into just acknowledging the work that my past self did and how she did such a good job. And maybe you can think about that as well, where you can think about parts of like your entrepreneurial journey and you want to beat yourself up. You can't do that. You can't do that at all. So that is the story of me and my Pilates DVD. I hope it's not too disjointed. Hopefully you got something out of it, if not just a really good, entertaining story. I love my DVD. I have it at my desk. I have a couple copies at my desk and I look at them regularly. And it's interesting that sometimes people will come up and they'll be like, is that you? And I'm like, yes, it's me. I also had a television commercial, which again, I could go into like the whole story of this, but gosh, I feel like that this would end up being a book, or we would be here all day. We would be here all day with everything that happened with it. I will say that I feel like the peak of this was getting the DVD and myself featured in Marie Claire magazine. I had 3 pages. And again, I did that myself. I feel like most of the opportunities that I had was very much chased by me. And although I would have liked for it to kind of like get its own momentum and be known and be contacted, you know, that just like wasn't the journey that happened with that product. Like it did with a couple of things, but for the most part, I drove everything, every sale. I really, like every dollar that I made, I really felt like that I had made that. And what's really interesting is for a long time, I felt like that I had maybe regretted the choice, but I feel sometimes it's way too early to call a decision being good or bad, because now everyone can be a business coach. Anyone can start a business. Anyone can come on the internet and say, I'm incredible at this. I have something that shows people immediate trust and authority that I have been in business this long and that I am good at business because I have a DVD. Like I've been here. I've been around the block. I've been around the block 50 times. So it's interesting now that that has become, I think, one of my best assets. And you can even look now at eBay. You can type in Peter Sarris Stretch or Peter Sarris Pilates and DVDs will come up. And I think at the moment there's like 6 pics or something on there. So if you want to get your hands on them, go and have a look. If I'm ever in like a little secondhand shop browsing for stuff, I will always go into the DVD section. And I remember once someone on Instagram messaged me and she's like, oh my gosh, guess what I found in the secondhand shop? I had to buy it. And I felt so much pride that my little project that I created myself is still out there in circulation, and that really was the start of it all. So hot stuff, I hope you like this little story, and I hope that I will get to see you on July 1st. If you are listening to this podcast much, much later, there will be a replay up, but get your butt along because as always, I teach a fucking damn good workshop. So I will link that below. But hot stuff, I love this. I love you. I love you more than my little work stint that I've done this weekend. We've had a long weekend here in Melbourne and I've come in like every day. So 3 days, just getting ahead, recording episodes, editing, getting them up. I love the podcast. I love that it's quiet. I love that I can really get into the work zone. So I love you more than that. I love you more than the fact that we have I'm going to call it like a luxury health club in the building and we're allowed to use their bathrooms. And it was raining outside and I got to work and my hair was just wet. And I'm like, let me just go down and just give it a little blow dry. Let me spritz on some organic perfume. Let me just sit in the nice lighting with the nice smells and the nice music and just get myself in this like grounded state before I come in and record this sexy little podcast episode for you. So I love you more than that. I love you more than my cute mom. Oh my God, her TV is like half dying. Like the remote, it just will stop working. And it takes us forever. It took us last night an hour to get into the Gilmore Girls to watch it. And I said to her, why haven't you bought a new TV? I'll just buy you a TV. I said, I'll just buy you a TV. Just tell me what you want. She's like, I don't know what I want. It's so overwhelming. And I'm like, okay, all right. Okay, so this is an overwhelm thing. This is why we haven't progressed. So we went on to chat and I just asked chat some questions and then we went to appliances online and we're comparing some stuff and then she's reading the reviews and I'm like, Jen, do not read the reviews. I'm like, we're going to look at YouTube and then we're going to see like what people have done. We're going to look at the comments. More importantly, we're going to go to Reddit. How good is Reddit? I am obsessed with Reddit. I spend so much time on Reddit and Pinterest. It's like if I'm not on Insta, I'm not at work, you can't find me. You're like, where is she? What's she doing? I'm on Reddit. That's where I am. So hot stuff, let's wrap it up because it has been a long one. And guess what? Girlfriend needs a coffee. Girlfriend needs some lunch. And I'm going to have a sexy little break. So hot stuff. I'll see you on the next episode. Mwah.